Hello, hello. What's up, whoever just joined? I'm going to do a little question and answer kind of format here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. Looks like one of you guys is here. So let me test my mic. Can you hear me okay? Testing, testing. Can you guys hear me? Hello, hello. Anyone who just joined, can you say something in the chat? Just let me know if you can hear me. Hello, hello, hello. Sweet. Hi, David. How's it going? Figured I hadn't done one of these in a while, and I don't know how many people are going to join, but figured this would be a good time to do a little Q&A if you have questions. Hello, 25 years old, learning to code. Very specific. How's it going? Just wanted to take some time to pop in, answer any questions you guys might have. Finally have a second, so shoot. Oh, awesome. I'm glad they're helpful. I know I haven't done them in a while, and I'd ideally like to be doing a lot more of these. It's just I don't know how many people are going to join. So either way, if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to see what you guys got, and I'll go for as long as I need to, I guess. Super noob question. How not to fall into just learning about doing stuff and start to apply for a job? How not to fall into just... I don't quite understand your question. Are you saying just like how can you kind of fast track your success into a job, like skipping all the technical stuff? I don't really know if that's the right path. I mean, you could get lucky. You could kind of network your way into a role. I mean, a lot of this industry is kind of who you know. So that could be one way, but I will say you're only doing yourself a bit of a disservice if you don't learn the foundations and if you don't take the time to, I'm assuming you mean a design role, like an entry-level design role. I think it's definitely worth at least learning the basics, especially if you're looking for a junior designer role. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question. I didn't quite understand what you're trying to say, but anything else? So are you trying to get a dev job or a design job? Because your name says 25-year-old learning to code. I'm curious. What about you, David? What are you a designer? Also curious how you guys might have stumbled across my content, how you found the channel. So weird because like I'll make videos sometimes and like the videos I don't think will do well are the ones that everyone seems to gravitate to, and then the ones I put a lot of effort into don't always do so well, which is kind of frustrating. But either way, I left some comments on your grid video earlier and I'd like to ask them here if you don't mind. Sure, go for it. Sorry, I haven't checked my comments today. I literally just got off work, so shoot. Graphic designer switching to product design. Nice. I feel like a lot of people kind of go that route. By the way, I just got a brand new whiteboard. I think this is a game. It's not. It's a 6-foot whiteboard and it's glass. I'm learning to get a design job. Currently, I'm doing internship with a remote job. My friend recommended your channel. Oh, cool. I'm a front-end dev switching to UIUX design. Nice. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Like I'm kind of backwards. Like I learned design and now I'm kind of learning some front end, just minimal front end, like just enough to be able to speak the language. Curious what you're doing, or like if you're having any luck getting a design job, or like anything that's been helpful specifically on your path to landing a job, or if you've been striking out or what, because I know it can be tough in the beginning. I'm unsure about when to use column grids versus layout grids. So I think, are you referring to, is the Bootstrap column grid just for web design? Yeah, so grids, don't take them too seriously, but grids are just a way to sort of align elements on a page. And I know in front end, there's Bootstrap and there's like CSS grid. These are basically just like front end frameworks that allow you to have some sort of rhythm and alignment to your design work. And when we talk about baseline grids, like usually, a popular one that like everyone uses now is like the 8-point baseline grid, or like a 8 or 4. There's a lot of reasons to use those grids. To be honest, like the main reason I use an 8-point grid is because literally everyone uses it. Like Google kind of started it with material design, which basically means when we talk about an 8-point grid, specifically like a soft 8-point grid, that means all of your spacing values in your UI design are going to be divisible by 8. So like, 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64. You get really good at counting by 8s when you use an 8-point grid. But like a button size, for example, right? It's going to fall on that baseline grid. It's going to be divisible by 8. And then usually text, at least the way I like to do it, text typically will align to a 4-point baseline grid, which means the line height of your text will be divisible by either 4 or 8. So like, multiple to 4, like 20, 24, 28, 32, 36. It's not to say you have to do that. It's just kind of, it's become sort of the industry standard, especially in like native product design. Web design, usually you take a little bit more creative liberty, I would say, and you kind of do things visually. But I think when you're talking about shipping like, pretty robust digital products, it makes a lot of sense to adhere to like a baseline grid. It just makes sure like everyone on your design team is, being consistent, and it helps developers be able to align things and really understand the behind the visual design. Is the Bootstrap column grid just for web design? No, it can be for product design as well. There's plenty of great info on grids out there. I think in one of my videos, probably the one you're referring, I think I linked something below on the 8-point baseline grid, which would be a really good read. But honestly, it's one of those things, especially as a designer, you just kind of got to like look at popular design systems. What I would do, is just take screenshots of apps like Instagram and like all the popular apps, bring them into Figma, turn on your 8-point grid, and see how designers are aligning to that grid. It can be really helpful. Question on typography. I think that's what you mean. I can't seem to make line height work for me to make too good. Same with the selecting fonts. Do you have any tips? I don't know really what you mean by you can't seem to make line height work for you. As far as selecting fonts, it all depends on the brand, right? And like what you're trying to communicate through the typography. I will say that, it's a pretty safe bet these days if you're doing web work or product work to choose like a modern kind of sans serif, which means without serifs or without those little tails. It's really easy to read. Like you can go for something more decorative if you're doing something like editorial where you add serifs. But again, like I'm not a brand designer, but it will depend on what you're designing. The font you use, but you can never go wrong with, a really clean kind of sans serif, like Open Sans or Montserrat, Futura is a popular one, Avenir. I'll try some master copies. Thank you. What do you mean by master copies? Oh, like copying popular apps. Yeah, that's a really, really good way to get good at design. Because if you're copying what the best designers in the world are doing, then you kind of understand the way they think and why they made certain decisions. All good questions. Yeah, I like these live streams. I wish I had a bit more of a following because then I would have a lot more questions to answer, but I guess that's on my fault. I got to up more. It's just been busy. Any other questions? You guys working on anything cool? Oh, no worries. Your English is plenty good, especially if it's not your first language. But yeah, I appreciate the questions. These are all very, very valid questions. Yeah, a lot of it just, comes with practice. Like I don't consider myself to be a type expert. I'm not really a brand designer, although like over the years, I think my visual design skills have gotten a lot better and I think I can do brand design now, but it's never been, I've never just been like a dedicated kind of visual identity designer. I'm more on the product side, more like strategy, UX design. I'm a bit unclear on horizontal widths and spacing. Should that adhere to grid columns or 8-point grid? Yeah, so horizontal, it really doesn't matter as much because if you're designing in a responsive framework, which I think your question is getting at, the grid size should, especially if you're using like a stretch grid, it should respond to the browser size. So I wouldn't worry so much about horizontal alignment. It's more, the 8-point grid is more for vertical rhythm, right? That said, if you're designing at a mobile say you have like a carousel, right? Like a horizontal swiping carousel. It can be helpful to align like card components horizontally with like 8 pixels of padding in between or 16 pixels of padding in between. But honestly, like on mobile, sometimes I don't even use a grid. I'll adhere to a baseline grid, but I won't necessarily like put columns in my design because on mobile, it's not as important. But yeah, to answer your question, I would say the horizontal spacing between items usually isn't as important in product design. But yeah, definitely vertical rhythm is like it's going to be more important, like regardless of what you're designing. Does that make sense? It would be awesome if I could like get into Figma and do one of these and just show you kind of live. So I think I need like you can't just do it on YouTube for something, a third-party plugin to do that or a third-party app. Sorry if you already answered this question, but how often do you use dev tools to check dev's work? Do you use the inspect dev tool or any other helpful tools? Are you talking about like within Chrome, like how you can enter inspect mode? Yeah, like I will use that like kind of fairly often. I will say if I see something cool on the web and I'm like curious on how it was built, like what the structure was, sometimes I'll go in inspect mode. And if it's something I want to like try to recreate in Webflow myself, sometimes I'll just open inspect. I also use it for like, just like for picking up like font styles and colors. And I don't really use it too often though, to be honest, because I'm a designer first and foremost, so I don't get too in the weeds with like how things are actually built. But yeah, it is cool, like just like knowing, especially once you have a general sort of understanding of front end development. Like for me, that came through just getting proficient at Webflow, at least conceptually, to understand how a website is built now. Like it's cool being able to like open up inspect and just seeing the structure of something or what was used, whether it was like Flexbox or CSS Grid. I think having some sort of understanding of these frameworks actually does help you a lot as a designer. I'm not saying you need to learn to code, but it just helps you speak the same language as developers on your team, and it gives you some empathy for like what they deal with, and like if you understand how a developer wants their assets to be handed off, it makes you more organized in your files, which I think is just a really good skill to develop. There's a lot of great stuff, like a lot of stuff Figma's doing now with auto layout. Like they've tried to really closely resemble things like Flexbox. So the line between design and development is becoming a lot more, I guess, blurry. Like it's pretty close, and the way design tools are built now sort of emulate the dev environment, which is really cool. So like even if you don't really know front end development, but you know auto layout, I think you kind of already sort of have an understanding of things like Flexbox. And if you understand grids, you kind of understand Bootstrap. Good question though, Sheena. Where are you guys all from? I'm curious. Hopefully it's not too late. I'm in LA, so it's only 7:30 here. Do you think in the future front-end design and front-end development will combine? I think they are sort of combining, and tools like Webflow, that's exactly why it was built, right? It's to sort of empower designers to not only design great stuff, great websites, but actually give them the tools to build it and push it live. And I see a lot more of that happening. I don't think it will ever be sort of one-to-one. I think there's always going to be like a separation between designers and developers. Maybe not, but I think for the time being, I think they're going to be separate disciplines. I hope to learn Webflow this year. Your videos are very helpful for me, so thanks so much and keep them coming. Yes, I'm glad you find them helpful, and I will try to make more. It's been kind of hectic. Wow, Nepal, 6 a.m. I hope you're just getting up and weren't staying up until 6 a.m. Good to meet you too, though. That's cool that you're calling from Nepal. Never been. I actually got a backpack from Nepal the other day. I didn't get it in Nepal, but it's a Nepalese backpack. I see there's a few more that just joined. For those who just joined, I'm just kind of answering some questions. I had some time tonight to hop on. I know I haven't done this in a while, so yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'd love to hear about like how you found the channel, or what you're up to. If you're a designer, if you're a developer, if you're neither. Or if there's any video topics you guys want me to cover. Now is your time. Anything at all? Career advice, design advice, life advice. How do you develop an eye for design? I think it's a combination of things. I think mostly it's just designing a lot of stuff and like trying to solve a lot of problems. When you say eye for design, I'm assuming you mean more the visual design side of things. Because like I hear the word design and the visual is only one part of it. But as far as like becoming a better visual designer, honestly just comes with practice. But there's some things like I mentioned earlier, like not copying like to steal someone's work, but just like, screenshotting your favorite apps, bringing them into Figma, seeing how they were constructed, basically like pixel for pixel. What's the sizing used typically for like a mobile button, or what is the size of an avatar typically on mobile, or what are some common UI patterns? Also, sites like Dribbble, I think if you go on the Dribbble like homepage, you could say like objectively, like this is pretty solid design. Kind of stops there. It's tough to say like if the designs on Dribbble really solve a problem or met business needs or user needs. But from a visual design standpoint, like I think it's objectively, you could say most of the stuff on Dribbble looks pretty good. And Dribble's a great tool because it kind of gives you a sense of like what design trends are. And you can kind of check out where some of these designers work, and if they work at like pretty well-regarded agencies or design teams, like you can almost bet that they're talented designers and they're good visual designers at least. So that's one way to do it. But yeah, it's really just comes down to practice. It's like anything else, right? Like I sometimes I make music, I make beats sometimes. And like when I was first starting out, like I thought my music was great, but like 2 years later, listening back on my earlier stuff, like it's pure trash. So it's the same thing with like music production. Like just over time, you develop a better ear for like what sounds good and what arrangement worked well. And same thing with design, right? It's just practice. You got to develop your eye. And yeah. The cool thing about UI design though is I think like once you have a foundation, like if you understand like what baseline grids are, and if you've designed enough interfaces and you get in the habit of actually looking at these things on your device, like if the sizing looks right on your phone versus just like in Figma, just doing that over and over again, you start getting so much better, you think so much faster. And yeah, you just develop over time. I thought my first design is good, but I feel like it's trash now. That'd be a really good idea for a video to make. Like I could show you some of my old concept designs that I thought were probably amazing at the time. That'd be really fun. But yeah, it is cool. And that's a good point, because I would say if you're just starting out, like save all of your work so that one day you can look back and just see how far you've come. I think that can be really powerful, because especially in this industry, in the tech industry, like it's a lot of imposter syndrome, and like I face it every day too. Like I'm surrounded by like such amazing designers at my company, and sometimes like I don't feel like I'm good enough, but then like I'll take a step back and like see how far I've come, or I look at, even like on the project level, like sometimes some of my early explorations that I thought were great, like in hindsight were absolutely terrible. And I don't know, it's just cool, like having that perspective. So But yeah, I think every designer probably has a vault like their old designs that they probably never want to see the light of day. But yeah. Hey, Michelle. How do you prefer to hand off work to development, especially for motion and interaction design? Love your videos. Thank you. I'm glad you find them helpful. That's a really good question. And I will say on the motion and interaction end, that's like one area that I found like none of these tools have really nailed yet. I think sometimes you get lucky and you have like a really good front-end developer who has a knack for motion and interaction design and is just like really skilled in these areas. So in that case, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just send them like a pre-rendered video and basically just say, here, try to match that. And I'll kind of work with them until they get it right. Like if something's too slow or if, you know, the motion's not snappy enough or whatever, like I'll kind of just work with them. But sometimes you don't always have that luxury and you have to be a lot more prescriptive. So what I'll do, like in a design system, I'll literally say like, here's state one of this interaction, here's state two, here's how long it should take, here's how, you know, here's the time difference between these elements, here's the easing Bezier value that you can apply. So you can be really prescriptive in that sense. Usually though, like if it's like a massive like app design with like say 300 plus screens, you try to make those annotations somewhat global, right? So you would say something like, you know, when elements enter a screen, we want to decelerate them at 300 milliseconds with this Bezier curve, right? So it's global. It applies to everything in that scenario. That way you don't have to detail out every little thing. But usually it's, I don't know, like, unfortunately, a lot of times motion and this stuff gets kind of shoved aside till the very end, right? It's like kind of like icing on the cake. So it's almost like you show developers prototypes or you show them like pre-rendered videos and you just say like, do your best. It shouldn't be that way. Like right now, what I'm trying to do is I try to make motion and interaction design like way bigger of a deal, especially like, because that's kind of my like bread and butter. If you guys have been watching my videos for a while, like you kind of know I'm really big on motion and interaction design. And I try to, I don't know, implement that stuff very early on. I do a lot of early motion prototyping just so that it kind of sets the tone for the whole experience. And I'm kind of rambling now, but yeah, it's tricky, I guess. And I guess to answer your question, it just depends on like who the developer is, how much time you have. I think in a perfect world, you'd be just super prescriptive. You can detail out all the stuff in a design system. But at the very least, you know, send the developer a prototype or send them, you know, a video. They'll just try to match it. Really good question, though. And that's something I think some of these tools, and I need to dive into ProtoPie, but I'm pretty sure they're like the closest in that regard. So like you can prototype something with like all the motion built in, and then the developer can just like go right in there and pull properties. I know you can actually do that in Vision Studio too. But I find that their web version, where you could just send a link to the web version of your prototype, it's kind of buggy. So it's, I don't know. I feel like that ProtoPie one could be the way, but we'll see. What handoff tool do you and your devs use? We use Figma for everything pretty much. And then if I want to get like, again, it depends on the project, the project, if it's like a marketing website versus like a native app. Sometimes I'll do everything in Figma. Sometimes I'll use After Effects and just like work hand on hand with the developer and say, like, I show them like, here's how something should move. Here's the easing value. Here's the timing of everything. But yeah, I think generally we use Figma for pretty much everything. And then the developer just like does their best job to interpret our prototypes, and we'll kind of give them feedback along the way if something doesn't look right. But yeah, Figma, like, I don't know what I'd do without Figma. I don't know how I designed without Figma for like the first 3 years of my career. And it's just such a game changer. Really good question. Michelle, where are you from if you're still on? / what brings you here? Also, I hope I answered your question. Do you have any suggestions on what fundamental that any beginner shouldn't miss out? When to know it's right time to apply for a job? Yeah, I would say the fundamentals, especially as a junior designer, contrary to what a lot of people will tell you, like you need to be an amazing end-to-end designer and, understand, user research and everything like end to end. Of course, that stuff's important, but I think you'd be better off just focusing, getting really good at visual design early on, just to be able to check that box. And then as you gain more exposure, you get better at like kind of understanding the problem space and like why you're actually doing what you're doing. I think that's kind of the jump between a junior designer and a senior designer. Junior designers mostly focus on the what, like what is the thing that you're actually designing. And then senior designers just start thinking more about like, why are we doing this, right? Like what problem are we trying to solve? What's the business goal? What's the user goal here? So as a junior, just, get a solid visual design foundation. And not so much like visual design as in like print design. Of course, like there's concepts there that translate well to digital, but learn about UI design, learn about baseline grids, learn about typography and type scale, learn some color theory, like just enough. Don't go crazy on it because that's not everything. But and that honestly just comes with practice, right? Learn what top designers are doing. Go on Dribbble, get a sense of design trends, get a sense of like UI patterns, especially mobile UI design patterns these days. And yeah, try to emulate those, I guess. Hi, how are you? I'm good. How are you? We're just doing a little Q&A here. Or whatever, honestly. I don't really have plans for this. I'm just curious to hear more about you guys, to be honest. And like what brings you here, how you found the channel. From the Bay Area. Nice. I'm in LA. Study new to UX, transitioning from operations. Nice. I'm, if you can't tell, I'm all in on UI UX design. It's a very rewarding career, especially if you're someone like myself who's, more of a creatively inclined person. But yeah, it's awesome. So good luck. What determines if you will create prototype mockups versus static mockups? I'm a junior designer for a startup, and I've just been creating static mockups, but need to do more prototyping. Yeah, I think, both serve their purpose. I think these days, though, most of the time, we're rarely thinking of things in terms of isolated screens. Of course, there's a time and place for those, but you want to start thinking about things holistically. Like what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Like who is the user? And then like, what is the user's experience through this entire journey of solving this problem? Like how do they get from point A to point B? What, if they press on this button, where does it take them? How does it take them there? We want to transport our users on a journey basically. And screens are sort of the medium. So get in the habit of, not just, once you have your screens, get in the habit of actually, linking them together. You don't have to do anything fancy, especially early on in your career, but like understand, what happens when I press on this button? Like, should something slide up from the bottom, or should we have like a push transition from one screen to the next? Because this is really, this is what interaction design is when you think about it. It's how do we interact with these digital products, and what happens when we take certain actions. And once you start prototyping more, you start thinking about, could there be an easier way to do this? A lot of times when you just do static designs, it's not until you prototype where you realize there's a problem in the flow, or you're missing something, or something can be improved, or there's friction. So yeah, just always get in the habit of, linking your screens together. Of course, you don't have to do it, all the time. You can wait until maybe you have like, 5 to 10 screens, but just get in the habit of linking your screens, and actually like, if it's a mobile app, tap through it. Does it make sense? Does it feel right? Could something feel better? It's oftentimes not until you start actually feeling the product that you've designed that, you can determine if it's a good product, if you've done a good job, or if you haven't. And if you're not the one doing that, sometimes you do user testing, and your users are the ones who can tell you that. They'll be like, this doesn't make sense here. I would have done this differently. That's why we prototype. It's so we can put our ideas in the hands of our users and get feedback on it. And if a picture says 1,000 words, a prototype says, God knows how many words. I mean, I'm all about prototyping everything. If you go on my website, my tagline is literally sweat the details, prototype everything. And I'm just so big on prototyping everything, getting out of PowerPoint, really just like prototyping everything is just such a better way of working. What determines if you will, you said that already. You said you're all in on interaction and motion. What tools like Protopy, or are tools like Protopy and Principle worth it? Or prototyping in Figma will be enough? I would say for honestly, 95% of the use cases, Figma will probably be enough, at least to be able to communicate your ideas and validate ideas with stakeholders. But if you're doing some more complex stuff, I wish I could just show you some of the stuff I've been working on, but motion is huge. But it depends what you're designing. Like if it's like a internal business tool, there's probably not going to be any advanced motion design or anything. But once you get into more like consumer products or marketing websites where there's a lot of flashy interaction and animation, you'll want to start doing stuff in maybe After Effects or Principle or one of these more, what's the word I'm looking for? Advanced prototyping tools. I have been working as an illustrator for about 6 to 7 months, but I am thinking of learning UX UI design because both the project budget sizes in the UX UI design area and it appeals to me more. Yeah, I think there's probably, I don't know if I'd say there's more opportunity, but I would say I think the scale of these projects will definitely be bigger, right? Because inherent in a lot of these UX UI projects is illustration, right? That's part of it. That's usually part of the visual identity, and that's part of communicating a message through illustration. I would say it's probably, I don't know. There's just so much more that goes into UX UI. Illustration's cool. It's very specific. It's part of the process. I know some great illustrators that really double down on illustration. But I think for people who really enjoy solving problems and creating value, UX UI is a really great career path. And I think having some illustration background can't hurt you. It shows that you're probably well versed with some digital design tools already, and you're probably a good visual communicator. But what I'm curious about is I have a goal set for myself in July to learn UX UI design and earn 10K, but I'm trying to learn from experienced names whether this is possible or not. When you say earn 10K, is that a month? Is that total or what? Yeah, I can't say for sure if that's going to be enough time for you to learn it. Everyone learns at their own rate. It kind of just depends on, do you have some sort of creative predisposition? Because I think those people will definitely excel in this field if you're a creative problem solver. And if it really resonates with you, I think you'll pick it up faster. And like anything else, the more time you put into it, the better you'll get. For me, I honestly haven't been doing this all that long, but because I love it so much, I've been able to, I think, put a lot of time into it without burning out. And because of that, I've been able to, I think, do pretty well in the field. So I guess it all just depends. Is it the right fit for you? And if it is, you'll do great. Any thought on Framer? To be honest, I haven't used it really at all. I think I opened it once and then I just didn't really see the point of it, at least for what I do. From my understanding, Framer kind of allows you to import React components and work with them. But I don't really, my design team, I've been on a few different design teams and no one's really, that use case hasn't really been part of my workflow at all. I think if I'm maybe a developer and also a designer, Framer could be a good tool, but yeah, I don't know too many design teams that are fully in Framer. And if they are, they're probably very kind of niche or smaller scale. I think Figma is really just the industry standard these days. I think UX UI design suits me as I think I'm good at problem solving and empathy. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, people ask me what's the #1 skill you need to have as a UX UI designer? And I would say empathy is #1, more so than any visual design, more so than any of the stuff I do on this channel, like, I mean, if you don't understand your users and you don't understand the problem you're trying to solve and you don't put yourself in their position and talk to them, like, you're not going to be able to create a product that solves their problem, right? You have to really understand them. So number one is empathy, and everything else is secondary. Do you enjoy working at an agency or corporate setting more? Definitely agency, but that's not to say that when you say corporate setting, I'm assuming you mean like in-house design team. Like, you know, if I were to work at like Airbnb in-house on their design team versus an agency who works on multiple different clients. I love working at an agency. Like, I think agencies sometimes they get reputation for like working really hard, which is true in any service industry, right? Because the client is always right. That's kind of I think the biggest challenge to working at an agency, because a lot of times, you know, if the client's always right, that's going to come at someone's you and the designers on their team. But first of all, I absolutely love where I work. I just joined a new agency, and I think if you find the right fit and you're surrounded by really talented people who care about you and you have a lot of fun work, it's a blast, and you always get to work on new stuff. Which is the best part. Like, sometimes you'll be on like a 2-month project, you'll roll off, do something else. So the work never really gets stale. Also, like, a lot of times in the agency setting, you're pitching, right? So you're pitching to actually win new work. And those to me are like the most exciting projects, because you're not always constrained by time and budget and scope, right? Like, you can kind of go a little crazier on those. So you can do some like really, really fun pitches. But yeah, I don't know if I don't know. Like, when I left my old job, I was considering going in-house at a few places, but I think I would really, really have to love the product to not get bored. Because like, no matter how much you love a project, like if you're on it for like, in my opinion, if you're on it for like over a year or two, like the work can start to get stale. Or not even get stale. It's just like you've been looking at the same thing for so long. It's hard to stay creative sometimes, because you're not looking at something with fresh eyes. So that's why I love, I love working on like new stuff all the time. Sometimes I'm working on multiple things at once, which can be challenging, but keeps you on your toes for sure. Good question. I think that's that was a question I had, like when I was first starting this career. I just really had to try both to figure it out. I also worked at a startup, like as I was working at an agency, which is pretty crazy. So I've seen it all. But I think for now, at least for the time being, I really like the agency culture. But again, it depends where you work. What are the best and worst kinds of clients? I think that's kind of subjective, but it kind of depends what you like, right? Like if you're on a client that's, say you love cars and you're working on a automobile client, like that could be really fun. Just working on one of those, which was a blast. I'm not even a big car guy, but I love that. But yeah, I mean, I've literally worked on, at this point, probably like 50 or 60 clients, all in different industries, like it's hard to say like what the best and worst clients are. I think it depends on the people at those clients, right? Like I've worked with some really amazing people on the client side and some really difficult people. But yeah, at the end of the day, it just comes down to who you work with and is the work exciting, Like I've worked in healthcare, which I thought would be not the most interesting, but it was amazing. It turned out to be great. I've worked in financial services, like, it just depends, honestly. Hi, Nate. What are some good resources for learning user research? I'm much more a visual UI designer and I'm really needing to round out my skill. Yeah, as far as resources, there's a great book that I refer to all the time. I actually have it right here. This book is great. It's called About Face. It's the essentials of interaction design. It's written by some people who were like, head of design at a bunch of tech companies, prestigious design firms. And it's like the textbook that a lot of people at CCA Academy or college, I forget what it stands for all the time, but it's like this college that's basically a feeder into all the big tech companies. And this is basically their curriculum. So if you want to learn how to solve for user needs and do user research, that's a great book. As far as like people on YouTube, there's a great channel Shout out to V from VA Experience. I'll write his name in the chat. You guys head over there. Let him know I sent you. But he has such a no frills approach to design. Like, I think a lot of newbies who are entering the field, like, they have such the wrong impression of like what it means to be a designer. Like, it's so much more than just like flashy designers or flashy designs on Dribble. It's like really getting to the meat of the problem and experience mapping and interviewing and synthesis. Like, he'll talk about all that stuff. I will say, look into the double diamond model. That's a really great framework. I'm actually going to do a video on that at some point, but yeah, definitely. I will say this about Facebook. If you buy it, it's not one that you'll just kind of skim through. Like, it's very dense, but it's one, like, have a pen and paper, highlighter in hand. Always have it as a reference. But honestly, more so than any textbook, like, if it'd be nice to say, you can follow this textbook step by step and apply it to every single project, but that's not the reality of it. Like, you need to just get commercial experience to really start to understand UX design. Design a Lily. I don't know who that is. Who are my favorite designers? That's a good question, because it's hard to say, because when people ask me that question, I'm assuming they mean like visual designers, because it's hard for me to say like someone I see on Dribble if they're a good designer or not. Like, I don't know if they're solving real problems. That said, I don't even know their names, to be honest. I wish I could tell you. Like, there's some really great like motion and interaction designers that I follow. I've been getting into 3D a lot lately. There's this one guy on YouTube named Derek Elliott. He's been called like the Bob Ross of 3D. So if you watch his videos, it's just like the most like relaxing thing, but he's also like super talented. Yeah, I don't know if I have like favorite designers. I mean, my favorite designers are honestly the people I work with, because they're like my mentors. And yeah, great questions. Another great book, which you guys have probably heard of this, but again, like, so this is all about design sprints, and it's written by this guy, Jake Knapp at Google Ventures, or he was at Google Ventures. But of course, like, these guys are just trying to sell you a process. So just be careful. Like just go into this with the understanding, like, it's not always going to be like this all the time in the world. But he kind of takes you through like what a design sprint is, and how to progress from how to solve problems really quickly in a really smart way. A lot of gem drop moments here. I'm glad you think so. Yeah, I honestly, I wish I could do this more. It's just, I don't think people understand like how, it's a big effort making YouTube videos, and mine aren't even like crazy edits. It's just like, I need to have a good idea. I don't want to just pumping out, visual design tutorials, because there's plenty of that on the internet already. Like, if I make a video, I really want it to be valuable and I want it to be relevant. I don't want to just be a content farm. So I think this format's good, because I get to just answer questions and kind of get a feel for what you guys are interested in. I'm worried about bringing up research at work. Yeah, it is pretty crazy. Like, research in a lot of people's mind is like the most important thing, yet like oftentimes companies look at it as a waste of time. My opinion on research is, of course it's important, of course, but I think a lot of times you can spin your wheels doing research, and you almost get like analysis paralysis. Whereas if you were to do like just enough research, then start prototyping, then start validating these prototypes with users, I think that's honestly like where I see the industry sort of heading. Because like, I've been on these projects in my old job. I was part of this larger, when it was like a consulting firm. And you have these researchers and these strategists doing like 3 to 4 months of research, which is like great. You come up with like these really robust journey maps and But that takes like 4 months. And by the time that's done, like the market could change, right? Users' needs could change and it could be a waste of time. And at the end of the day, the client's like, this experience map is great. All this, research you did is amazing, but we still need a website, right? Like when does that start? When can we actually start testing this with users? So I think it's finding the balance between research and, like there's a certain level of, I don't know, it's always controversial when I say this, but like there's a certain level of, if you've been doing this long enough, like you kind of understand, you can anticipate what users will want, and then you can go test with users. So it's almost like a shortcut sometimes. But again, it's finding the balance. I'll actually try to find a great article from our lead strategist in my agency that's goes into the subject. Let's see. Here we go. Great article, and post in the chat. And I definitely share this. This is sort of my mentality when it comes to research. Like, of course, it's super important, but it's finding balance. So I'll just leave it at that, and you can read the article. What do you do if you were 18 years old now? You enjoy your life because you got the rest of your life to work. No, that's a good question. I'm assuming you mean like what can I do in this field to like get ahead? I'm assuming that's sort of how you're framing this question. Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, like learn the fundamentals of digital design, but just try to get some experience, whether that's an internship or whatever it might be. And you'll be well on your way. Watch tutorials, start solving problems that you have in your everyday life. Like think of a problem, think about how you can maybe solve it through design, screen design specifically. And you'll start developing like a problem solving designer's mindset that way. And hopefully by the time you're ready to enter the workforce, you're good to go. When I was 18, I was a finance, well, I just started college and I was actually a finance major. So nothing to do with UI/UX design. I actually didn't start really, I actually didn't even know what this field was until I was about 21 when I interned at a mobile app startup, and I wasn't even the designer. And that's kind of the moment I realized like, this is what I wanted to do, so. What is your process when you started to design? How to go from idea to design work? Yeah, it's I mean, sometimes you're just really lucky and like you stumble across this problem and it's like this, there should be an app for this, or there should be a better way to do this. And you just, I mean, everyone's process is different, but sometimes if I have one of those moments, or if I encounter, say I'm on a website that could be better, like maybe I'll think of ways to make it better. I'll start sketching stuff on pen and paper. And if I really want to go the extra mile, I'll start bringing in a Figma, start designing, just like, prototyping, getting feedback on those prototypes. You can even do some research at that stage, right? Like, see what other people are saying about this product or this problem. My most recent video, I did like a walkthrough of a take-home assignment that I had to do for an agency that I was interviewing at, and that's a pretty good overview of like my end-to-end process. So I recommend watching that video. Which career would you choose? Do you regret in the stage that you're right now, 9 to 5? I don't regret what I'm doing at all. I feel like I took a lot of action early on. Like once I figured out this is what I wanted to do, I did everything I could to get into this space, and it's been like great ever since. Not without its challenges, of course, but I'm really satisfied with my career. I don't know if I'm going to be doing this forever. I think, the dream, what I really want to do is, what I've been doing is sort of building this YouTube thing on the side. And like kind of accidentally, this YouTube, it hasn't blown up, but it gets enough eyes on it where, like I'll never like be worried about having freelance work, at least. So if I ever did want to leave my job, which I don't, I could probably go full-time freelance, or I could maybe start my own thing. And like one day I do want to sell a course. I've been working this motion course for a while. It's it's been tough to finish it, to be honest. But yeah, I love what I do, to be honest. It's amazing. So, and look, I'm still learning too. So I want to be able to learn from people who have been doing this a lot longer than me, learning the ropes. And I feel like an agency is like a great place to do this because you get so much exposure to different industries and different types of projects. So yeah, like I'm just constantly learning, soaking in as much as I can, being a sponge, basically. Do you want to follow each other on Dribble? I actually don't even have a Dribble. So sorry. Did you ever feel burnt out? Yeah, well, so I actually left my old job because, well, one, I was working like a pretty demanding agency job as a UX designer. And on top of that, I was leading design at a startup here in LA simultaneously. So I was working like 80 hours a week. So by the time the startup, like I did my deliverable for the startup, I was just like super burnt out. So I needed a break. So I actually left my job. I just needed a reset, did some training. Of course, this all happened during COVID. So like there was that mental energy that I had to deal with. But yeah, it took some time off altogether to recharge, like figure out where I want to go, what type of designer I want to be. And I've noticed like I really want to be more of a native product designer. So like mobile apps, that type of stuff. So that's really what I was seeking in my next role or in my current role. So yeah, I definitely experienced a bit of burnout. And it's funny, like I was watching some of my old videos, like you could hear it in my voice, like how tired I was. That's the one thing about this industry. Like as much as I love it, like you're going to work a lot. But sometimes like that's, I'll work because I really love what I'm doing or I want to finish something. And I get so caught up in it, I'll stay up, till midnight working on something. But you gotta be conscious of your health and, give yourself time to rest as well. Can you tell me more about JBTD framework? Need examples, first of all. I don't know what this is. JBTD framework. What made you want to start your YouTube channel? That's a good question. Yeah, so when I was a management consultant and I really wanted to get into the space, it started off as sort of a supplement to my resume and my portfolio because I didn't have any commercial experience at the time, but I had taken on some personal projects of my own and like learned about prototyping and learned a bunch of these tools. So I was, I like for whatever reason, like there wasn't a lot of this content out there. So I was like, you know what, I've learned some of this stuff. Like I might as well put it on it. And worst case scenario, it'll be like a supplement to my portfolio. It'll, show that I'm somewhat competent at least the technical side of design, and just started uploading videos and it seems like they were somewhat valuable. So I just kind of kept doing it. I was pretty consistent early on and then, life got a little crazier. So I haven't been as consistent, but it's been fun. I also really enjoy doing it. And, the feedback's always pretty great from what I put out. And that makes me feel good that I'm helping some of you guys in your careers. So it's kind of why I do this. Good question. Difference between product designer and UI/UX designer. Yeah, that's so I talked about this in one of my other videos. So originally, I would say right now, the distinction, it's not that different. I think originally though, people in Silicon Valley started calling their designers product designers because that's usually where like the innovation really happens, right? It's going from 0 to 1, where you're creating a new product, right? So a product hasn't been established yet. So you're assessing the product market fit, right? Like you're saying, based on this problem that this group of people are having, should there be a product to help solve those needs? And then what does that product look like? Whereas when we talk about like UX design, like a UX designer will usually come in after a product has been on the market for a bit, and they'll come in and start optimizing the product. So that's kind of like the key difference. Of course, there's some more nuances than that. I will say like most of the jobs you'll see like on LinkedIn or whatever that say UI/UX designer or product designer, they're more or less the same thing, just because everyone's calling their designers product designers, even though they might not really technically be designers. I will also say that product designer usually has a little more emphasis on solving business goals in addition to just user goals, right? So it's almost like a combination of a UIUX designer and a business analyst is how I like to describe it. But yeah, they're pretty similar. Like if you look at the job descriptions, like the day-to-day will look very similar on all of these roles. Agency work sure burns you out, but so does startup work. I'm currently finding that out. Yeah. You just have to, I don't know, you have to take care of yourself. I don't know what to say. Sometimes it's a bit out of your hands and you have a deliverable and you just have to get things done. And that's just the way it is. But I don't know. I'm like somewhat addicted to the to the hard work of it. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I really enjoy it. So it could be worse. Look, I'd rather be working, 12 hours doing what I love than, 8 hours of stuff that I absolutely hated in my old job. So I'm sure some of you guys can relate. Jobs to be done. You are a product designer. Yes, I am a senior product designer. The take-home assignment video you did was great. Thank you. Seeing an example opened my eyes in ways that other content doesn't do well. More of that. Yeah, I'm glad you think so. That was kind of my goal. I think it's so much easier for me to make a tutorial on here's a visual design exploration I made for this website. Like anyone can do that if you have somewhat decent visual design skills, but that's kind of what I want to do is show you how to tie everything together, right? Like how to go from a problem that someone's having or a business is having or a group of people is having, start, understanding the user, understanding their needs, understanding the business needs if it's a business, and working towards a solution to solve that problem and what that looks like. And of course, visual design is part of that, but it's not everything, right? Like, what's that expression? It's a design that doesn't solve a problem is just decoration, which is somewhat true, right? Like, of course, it's great to have, stunning visual design skills. That always helps. It's not a bad thing, but it's hard to say if you go on Dribble, right? And if you see someone's beautiful UI design work, like you could say objectively, this looks really good, but does it solve a problem? How are we supposed to know without seeing, a study or without a full walkthrough of how they got from point A to point B? So that's what I was going for in that video. And that one in particular, like that was for a role, senior product designer role at a top design agency. It actually got an offer, didn't accept it, but like, I think that should, if that got me an offer, and if you're able to understand that process, and if you can replicate something similar in a case study, I think it will be really helpful, and it should, position you well for product designer role. Yeah, thanks for watching. Glad you could join us. 25 years. Tips for getting started as a designer in this career. Yeah, so I think I covered that already. I don't know if you joined a bit later, but yeah, there's plenty of things you could do. Like I said earlier, I would say junior designers focus more on visual design, even though that kind of contradicts what I just said. Definitely, get your visual design skills in order, understand a bit of the end-to-end process, but just know, like as a junior, you're probably not expected to, take a product from ideation to implementation. But it is going to be expected that you have some sort of visual design skill set. So there's plenty of things you can do. You can watch tutorials, you can watch some live tutorials, you can copy your favorite designers, you can see what design trends are on Dribble, stuff like that. Read books. Any other questions? Wow, I've been on for an hour. It feels like it's 20 minutes. Thanks for all the questions, everyone. Decent amount of questions from only I think there was like a max of 10 people in this, so pretty cool. I see some familiar faces in here, so that's good to see. Any other questions before I log off? Going once. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. And yeah, let me know if there's any other video topics you want me to cover. I'm gonna put my email in the chat too. You can always shoot me an email. What is it? It's literally just jpdesignacademy@gmail.com. Yeah, if you have any questions, send those my way. One more question came in. Is it possible to do something like that video, but with design feedback from users? So the funny thing is, I actually shared that project with my current agency, and I got some feedback on it, and it was all like really, mostly good, and like some things I was like, wow, I should have thought of that. Like, why didn't I think of that? And I wanted to post that video, but I ran it by people at my agency, and like some people just didn't want to be on the internet, which is totally understandable. So I just like re-recorded it. But yeah, I think that was like the part I was missing from that, is like the whole user testing piece and like how I would take that user feedback and iterate again. So I'm trying, let me figure out a way to maybe do that. Or maybe like it's you guys giving the feedback and I could, show you how I would address that feedback. That would be kind of cool. So yeah, thanks for the idea, Odafe. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Yeah, you're welcome, Michelle. These should be weekly sessions. Yeah, I mean, if that's something you guys want, I'd be down. As long as I have time to do it. Sometimes it gets kind of hectic and I don't have a ton of energy during the week at this hour, but yeah, these are fun. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. I really appreciate the time. All great questions. Again, I left my email in the chat, so if you have any questions or video topics you want me to cover, shoot those my way and I'll try to address them. Thanks everyone. I'm logging off.